They told you the headache would last 3 days. It lasted 11. Not a sharp pain, more like pressure. Like something behind your eyes learned the exact weight needed to remind you it was there without becoming unbearable. You got used to it the way you get used to a low hum in the walls of an old building. You stopped noticing it. That was the point. That was 6 weeks ago. Now you are sitting in a government office on the 4th floor of a building that does not appear on any public map, drinking coffee from a paper cup that someone placed in front of you without asking if you wanted it, and the man across the desk has not looked up from his screen in 4 minutes. You counted. The room smells like recycled air and something faintly chemical, the kind of smell that makes you think of hospitals without being quite that. There is a window behind him, but the glass is treated, milky white, letting in light without letting you see what is outside. You have been trying to figure out which direction you are facing since they brought you in. You cannot. The man finally looks up. Your baseline is clean, he says. That is good. You nod like you know what that means. 6 weeks ago, you were a participant in what the official documentation called a voluntary cognitive integration study. 14 pages of consent forms. 3 separate interviews. A medical screening that took most of a Tuesday. They were thorough in a way that felt designed to make you feel safe. And it worked, because you signed everything, and you went in on a Wednesday morning, and they placed something at the base of your skull that they described as smaller than a grain of rice. You did not feel it go in. You felt the headache start 40 minutes later, on the drive home, sitting in the back of a car with tinted windows while a woman in a gray jacket asked you questions about your childhood and wrote down your answers in a notebook with a pen that made no sound. You told her about the house you grew up in, the color of the kitchen, a dog you had at 9 years old. She wrote it all down. You did not think much of it at the time. The first time you knew something was different was day 4. You were making breakfast. Eggs, the same way you always make them. And you thought, without meaning to, without it feeling like a thought you were generating so much as one that simply arrived. The yolk is going to break. And then it broke. You stood there holding the pan, and you told yourself it was coincidence. Prediction. Pattern recognition. You had made eggs 1,000 times. Your brain knew the physics. You made eggs again the next morning. You thought, this one will hold. It held. You put the pan down very carefully and sat at the kitchen table and did not eat. They call it passive monitoring. That is the phrase in the documentation you received at week 2. A thin folder slid under your door at 6 a.m. with no accompanying note. Passive monitoring means the device does not read your thoughts in the way you imagine when you hear the word read. It does not produce transcripts. It does not capture language. What it captures, the folder explains, is prelinguistic cognitive signal. The electrical architecture of intention before intention becomes thought. The shape of what you are about to think, a fraction of a second before you think it. They call this the anterior signal. You read that paragraph 4 times. Then you thought, very deliberately, I know you can see this. Nothing happened. No response. No confirmation. No sign that anyone anywhere registered that sentence. But you felt, and you cannot explain this, you felt something shift. Not in the room. In the air around your head. Like a change in pressure so subtle you might have imagined it. You did not imagine it. The man across the desk is named something you were not meant to remember. He introduced himself at the start of this meeting with a name that slid away from your memory like water off glass. You do not know if that is intentional. You suspect it is. He is telling you about the second phase. Phase 1 was integration, getting the device settled, calibrating your baseline, mapping the specific signature of your anterior signal so the system can distinguish you from noise, from other signals, from the 847 other participants currently active in this city alone. You hear that number, and something cold moves through you. In this city alone. Phase 2, he says, is reciprocal. You ask him what that means. He folds his hands on the desk. He has the manner of someone who has explained this many times and has not yet found a way to make it land softly. It means the channel becomes bidirectional, he says. Up to now, we receive. In Phase 2, under specific circumstances, you may also receive. The room is very quiet. Receive what, you say? He picks up his coffee, takes a sip, sets it down. Guidance, he says. You think about the word guidance for the entire ride back. They sent you home in the same kind of car, tinted windows, no visible driver partition, smooth acceleration that tells you the driver is either very experienced or not human. You sit with your hands in your lap, and you think about what it means for a government to offer guidance directly into the space between your intentions and your thoughts. Because that is what he described. Not instructions delivered through a screen or a speaker. Not a message you can ignore or delay or close. Something that arrives in the pre-linguistic space, in the fraction of a second before you decide anything, in the part of your mind that you have always assumed was purely, irreducibly yours. You think, this is the part they are reaching into now. And then you think something that surprises you with how simple it is. I do not know if I will be able to tell the difference between a thought that is yours and a thought that was placed there. At home, you do something you have not done in years. You take out a paper notebook, an actual paper notebook, spiral bound, the kind you used in school, and you write down everything you are thinking as you are thinking it. Not because you believe it will protect you, but because you need to see your own thoughts rendered in your own handwriting, in ink, in a form that exists independently of any signal or device or system. You write for 40 minutes. Then you read it back. It sounds like you. It sounds completely, recognizably like you. Your rhythms, your tangents, your particular way of circling back to the same anxiety from 3 different directions before landing on something that resembles a conclusion. You feel something that is almost relief. Then you think, of course it sounds like you. It would always sound like you. That is what makes it undetectable. You close the notebook. 3 days before the Phase 2 activation date, you find the forum. You were not looking for it. You were searching for something unrelated, a restaurant recommendation, something completely mundane, and an indexed page appeared in your results that led to another page that led to a discussion thread that had been partially scrubbed, but not entirely. The way digital things are sometimes almost erased, but not quite, leaving traces the way a pencil leaves traces even after you have tried to erase it. The forum has 31 active members. You do not know how many have been deactivated. They have a language for things you did not have words for yet. They call the anterior signal the foreground. They call the reciprocal channel the second voice. They have been tracking, for months, the specific phenomenology of receiving guidance. How it feels different from your own thoughts. How to identify it. How. And this is the part that makes you sit very still. How some of them have learned to respond to it in ways the system does not register as response. You read for 2 hours. What you learn is this. The second voice does not feel alien. That is the design. It feels like a thought you were already having, slightly clarified. Like the version of your own reasoning that is just confident enough to tip you toward a decision. It feels like yourself, but more certain. One member writes, the terrifying thing is not that it controls you. The terrifying thing is that it helps you. It makes you better at deciding. Faster. More efficient. And you like it. That is when you know it is working. You stare at that for a long time. This is the thing you keep returning to. The thing that sits at the center of everything else like a weight you cannot put down. You cannot verify your own thoughts anymore. Not with certainty. Not with the easy, unexamined certainty you had before. The assumption so fundamental you never once thought to examine it, that the contents of your mind were yours. Generated by you. Belonging to you in the most absolute sense possible. That assumption is gone. And you understand now that the headache was not just the device settling. The headache was grief. Your nervous system mourning something it lost before your conscious mind understood what was being taken. Phase 2 activates at 7 a.m. on a Thursday. You know the exact moment because you feel it. Not pain. Not discomfort. Something more like the moment when a radio frequency locks in. When the static resolves into signal. A subtle rightness. A sense of the air around your thoughts becoming slightly denser, slightly more present. You are sitting at the kitchen table. You are thinking about whether to make eggs. And then you think, or something thinks, in the space where you think, yes, the eggs. And you notice it. Not because it is alien. Because it is too smooth. Your own uncertainty about breakfast does not resolve that cleanly. You circle. You hesitate. You think about what else is in the refrigerator. This thought arrived complete, without the friction of your actual decision-making process. You stand up. You do not make the eggs. You stand at the counter, and you breathe, and you pay attention to the texture of your own hesitation, the roughness of it, the way it catches and doubles back, and you hold on to that. The friction, because that, you decide, is yours. The smoothness is theirs. You develop a practice. Every morning, before you do anything else, you sit with a thought that has no correct answer. Not a decision. A question with no resolution. You think about whether a color you loved as a child is the same color you love now, or whether the word changed while the color stayed the same. You think about whether silence sounds different in winter. You think about things that loop and resist and refuse to conclude. You do this because the second voice has no use for irresolution. It optimizes. It resolves. It moves you toward conclusions efficiently and without friction. The irresolution is your fingerprint. You are learning to recognize it. You go back to the office on the fourth floor 3 weeks after Phase 2 activates. The man with the forgettable name is there again. He looks at his screen. He tells you your integration metrics are excellent. He tells you your decision latency has decreased by 34%. He tells you your stress indicators are down. He uses the word thriving. You ask him a question you have been building for weeks. When I make a decision, you say, "How do you know which part is mine?" He looks at you for a moment. "The outcome is yours."
Where were you
he
last
says.
night?
The process
Answer
is
me now.
collaborative. That is not what I asked. He picks up his coffee. The same gesture as before. The same slight delay. "No," he says. "It is not." He does not answer. You did not expect him to. But you needed to ask it out loud, in a room, in front of a person, so that it existed somewhere outside your own head, which is no longer a place you can entirely trust. Outside, the city is exactly as it always was. People walking. Traffic moving in its rhythms. A woman buying fruit from a stand on the corner, holding each piece up to the light before deciding. A kid on a bicycle taking a corner too fast and laughing when he makes it. You stand on the sidewalk and you watch them and you wonder. 8:47 in this city alone. How many of the people you are watching right now are making decisions the way you are? How many of them felt the headache and thought it was the flu? How many of them have already stopped noticing the smoothness, stopped feeling the friction of their own uncertainty, stopped being able to tell the difference? How many of them feel, as the man said, like they are thriving? You start walking. You do not know where you are going. That feels important. The not knowing. The absence of the smooth, resolved thought that would tell you go left, go toward the thing that needs doing. The presence instead of your own unresolved motion through a city that may or may not be full of people who no longer fully own the space between wanting something and deciding to want it. You walk for 40 minutes. You end up at the river. You did not plan to. There was no optimization. Your route was inefficient and doubled back twice and took you through a street under construction where you had to walk on the narrower side and wait for a truck to pass. It was entirely yours. You sit on a bench by the water and you take out the spiral notebook and you write that down. Walked to the river. Did not mean to. Took the wrong streets. Waited for a truck. Arrived. Then you write. This is what I look like when I am still me. You read it back. You keep it. The river moves the way it always has, indifferent to signals and systems and the question of who is generating what inside whose skull. A bird lands on the railing 6 feet to your left and looks at you with the pure, administrative blankness of a bird. You look back. Nobody is monitoring this. You are almost sure.